share this with one, but I think the best thing to do is to find documents, get the documents, save it, study it on your computer, or print them out for yourself. Like the second part, part two. Part one is interesting because in part one, if you scroll a little bit more, you see map 3. Map 3 is very, very important. This is what first captured my interest, because it's what many of us had suspected, that Israel and Judah of the Bible is not in the location that people believe today. Like now, people believe that what they call Israel, the state of Israel, is where ancient Israel was. And there is an abundance of evidence through, I would say, the ages of the last maybe couple of hundred years, both older archaeologists and more modern archaeologists, who have tried to prove this idea that Israel, ancient Israel, was where they call Israel today, where they said that the Middle East, and all these preachers and pastors of white supremacy are like, hey, we got to support the so-called Jewish state because this is prophecy, and they talk about 1948, Zionism in the Old Testament. But now what I'm proposing, and this is the subject matter of a manuscript I like to work on, and this is kind of like just a kind of a working out some of the basic ideas. Makeda, the Queen of Sheba, Black Zionism. See, a lot of people don't understand when we talk about Black Zionism, we try to call it African Zionism, and it's also known historically as Ethiopianism or Ethiopianism, which really gained its modern day emergence in the Western Hemisphere among us as lost sheep of the house of Israel, or Falashes of the West, as black people in the West. A lot of the Hebrew Israelite patriarchs and matriarchs like Rabbi Matthews, Wentworth Arthur Matthews, and others kind of laid the foundation, the black Jews of Harlem, for what we are about today and where we stand. This is where we have the difference with some of the Hebrew Israelites, which you call them like the latter-day Israelites. In other words, it's almost like take, for example, you have Nation of Islam, and then you have the Nation of Gods and Earths, or the 5% Nation. There's a link between the two, Clarence 13X, and then we have the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Then there's the whole thing about Fard Muhammad, and some say, well, it wasn't that Fard Muhammad, it was actually someone named Farad, or Farad, so forth and so on, who actually was a so-called Arab, and not this Fard, Ford, who was actually a white guy who was another person put in. So I don't want to even get into that, but I just point that out because if you just look at this superficial story, you might get confused. But right here, this particular map right here is very, very interesting, but we need to understand more about Black Zionism, as Black Zionism emerged in the Americas and the Caribbean around the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, and even before that in the late 1800s. But if you go into African American and Afro-Caribbean history, you'll see that the Europeans, the slave drivers, slave masters, the pirates, so forth and so on, who, oh pirates, they robbed I, and the merchant ships and sold us into slavery and everything, that they even knew that we were Ethiopian. In fact, the Atlantic Ocean, as we pointed out before, wasn't called the Atlantic Ocean, but the southern part of it that comes from the so-called slave coast was actually called the Ethiopic Ocean. And when you look at older maps, they have Ethiopia Superior and Ethiopia Inferior on the map. So Ethiopia Superior is more on the other side of the Nile River. Now when you cross that river, as the Bible talk about, you come into West Africa, central to West Africa, and that's called Ethiopia Inferior. You know what I'm saying right here? So they are the ones who ascribe these ideas. So now when we look at the map today and we look at how history has been rewritten today by them, by Eurocentrists and so-called Jews, those who call themselves Jews and everything. They have totally altered and disfigured a lot of the historical evidence. If you look in a dictionary, Old Webster's, called Negro and Ethiopian. If you look in a dictionary today, you probably won't find that definition on the surface unless you go to the Old Webster's. So that's why we just spend the time on that idea right there. So the Europeans will talk about Zionism, and they'll tell you about 1948 and the state of Israel reclaiming their alleged promised land, so forth and so on. Now the whole world, and you get a lot of ignorant black Hebrew Israelites that think, well, we're all going to return to the Palestinian beach. It's not about the Palestinian beach, the Palestinian coast. What the modern state of Israel since 1948 is the Palestinian coast. It's not the original Israel of the Bible. And this is one of the major reasons why they have such a problem finding archaeology. That's why you get some people say, well, Moses never existed, and Israel, and there was no King Solomon, and it was all like written after the fact, and it was all fantasy, so forth and so on, because there's no evidence. Look, there's evidence of ancient Egypt, so forth and so on. We maintain, and other scholars have gone into this in more detail, even Sheba and Israel by Bernard Lehman has gone into some good detail, giving some maps and everything, that they're looking in the wrong place. Basically, they're looking in the wrong place, and this map right here is very significant, which is map 3 in Queen of Sheba and Israel, and you can download it free on the internet, and we're probably going to post a link at our website as well, and those who are interested, just link us about that, or we'll try to put some information maybe in the description. But when we look in this map, look at the key of the map. The key of the map says Solomon's Kingdom, the yellow, and then the orange, like reddish orange, the orange, it says, is the area annexed after Queen of Sheba's visit, her state visit, and it was held for 40 years. Now, if you understand what part of the Middle East this is, where the true Israel and Judah today, this is what they call Saudi Arabia and Mecca. But if you do a little bit of historical research, you'll recognize that Saudi Arabia was only named Saudi Arabia after like around 1930 or after 1930, basically. So this is a new thing. Before 1930s and everything, there was no Saudi Arabia. Before, like, I think it was 1930, 1920, but before the 19th century, if you went back in the 1800s, there was no Saudi Arabia. It was called Arabia or Western